We can start.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so delighted to have you with us. Today is Menstrual Hygiene Day, and I'm delighted to be hosting very grassroots activists who are working on the continent towards ensuring that menstrual hygiene is not a wish, but is a right that is accessible to a lot of young women across the continent. So we have with us Sodfa Daaji, and we have with us Peters, who is the executive director of an organization in Cameroon, and Ruth as well, who works for, or who leads a nonprofit organization in Tanzania. And you know, this webinar really joins further activities that are taking place on the African continent to think deeply about the issues that underpin Menstrual Hygiene Day. And in this conversation in particular, we really want to focus on concrete steps to push for change. These are solutions which have been designed with young women and not without them. So really, the conversation today will not be hypothetical, and as activists on progressive and as activists on the ground, we're really advocating for the title of this webinar, for the removal of taxation on menstrual products in Africa, and for the enforcement of progressive period policies in all workplaces and provisions, and the provision of free sanitary pads and sanitation in all schools. So this is really in alignment with our mission of ensuring that the demands of Africa's young women, which have been voiced out in the Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto, are mainstreamed at both intergovernmental and grassroots level. So with Generation Equality Forum around the corner, which is the UN Women Convened Forum that will take place in June in Paris next month, and in consideration of the Action Coalition Commitments on Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, this conversation is really here to help us understand why it's timely to discuss period poverty and really provide solutions accordingly. Because as you know, it's really unacceptable that in 2021 to still have girls drop out of schools or lose their jobs because of their periods. So these conversations on menstrual hygiene matter, and you can definitely help us push for this demand. So thank you for joining this Nalafem Collective webinar. And I would first like my guests to introduce themselves, because they would do it with much generosity and better than I did. So Peter, can we please start with you? Could you please introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you, Amina. It's a pleasure being invited by this great initiative. So I'm Peter Fongeh from Cameroon, and I work for a community-based organization known as Vision in Action Cameroon. And Vision in Action Cameroon is a community-based organization that supports and enables adolescent girls and young women to create programs and influence change in the areas of sexuality, gender, health, education, all from a human rights-based perspective. Thank you very much, Amina.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Ruth, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ruth Meriki, born and raised here in Arusha, Tanzania. I'm the director and founder of a non-profit organization by the name LQ Naidim, short form EPN. LQ Naidim means chicken in both Maasai and French. One of our critical focus area is menstrual health hygiene education to girls in partnership with different non-profit. And LQ Naidim was founded based on my own personal story. I was born and raised in the Maasai community. I'll tell you a bit of the story later, but that is me. Yeah. Nice to meet you all, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ruth. We're very delighted to have you join us. I don't know if you and Peters can turn your cameras on. We'd love to see you, but if bandwidth is a challenge, that's okay. We're also keen on.
I really want to turn it on, but I'm just from the program, like 50 kilometers away from the town. we were doing a menstrual health hygiene program, and so I'm on the road back home.
That's okay. We really appreciate you taking time for this conversation. And last but not least, I would like for my colleague, Sodfa Daaji, who's the Nala Feminist Collective campaign coordinator, to introduce herself for us to kick off this conversation. Oh, my dear Sodfa, I think you're muted. Yes.
So sorry. Thank you very much, Amina. Thank you very much, Peter and Ruth, for joining despite your community engagements. Thank you very much for giving us your valuable time. I'm sure we will have a great chat. As Amina mentioned, my name is Sodfa. I'm the campaign coordinator for Nala Feminist Collective, and I'm very excited to be on this side as a speaker, although I will be presenting the work we do, the manifesto, and I look forward to hearing the insights from the speakers.
Thank you so much, Sodfa, Ruth, and Peters for joining us. So let's dive right into it. I would like to invite all the attendees that we have with us to also tell us where they are connecting from. So please, this conversation is really participatory and we want to hear your voices. So don't hesitate to send through your questions as we go through the conversation. So I would first like to start by asking Sodfa about the Africa Young Women Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto, and with the demand on sexual and reproductive health and rights. So among the demands of the manifesto, the sexual and reproductive health and rights really addresses menstrual health and period poverty. So could you please provide or shed light and provide further context on what participants from the regional barazas have shared? So just for context, the barazas were regional consultations which took place with 1,500 young women and men from across the continent to speak about the issues that underpin the challenges young women face. And they also brought solutions to these. And this culminated in the Africa Young Women Beijing Plus 25 Manifesto, which the Nala Feminist Collective is driving through, is driving forward to the Generation Equality Forum next month, and with a very strong council who's ready to advocate for the making and the creation for further spaces for Africa's young women, because we believe that we can't keep moving with the tokenization of young women's voices, and we're ready to create space for each other. So to you, Sodfa, what is the context that the participants on the regional barazas have shared in regards to menstrual health and period poverty?
Thank you very much, Amina. First of all, perhaps for those who are not very familiar, when we talk about Beijing, when we talk about Generation Equality Forum, when we talk about Action Coalition, just a few seconds to explain that 26 years ago, the fourth conference on women occurred in Beijing, and we have seen a strong participation of African women, but specifically of civil society. That's where we have started to hear about gender equality. We have started to hear about civil society organizing, although we know that in the context of the African continent, this is not the first time. African feminist movements been there since ages. So when the Fourth World Conference occurred, as an outcome, came out the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It's a very progressive document and vision, and indeed has guided these 25 years of work when we talk about gender mainstreaming, when we talk about intersectionality, when we make reference to international instruments, has guided also our Maputo protocol at continental level. So after 25 years, it felt the need to have a fifth conference on women. And this is also based on conflicts, specifically in the global south, but also the rise of new forms of violence like the digital facilitated gender-based violence. And that's when Generation Equality Forum comes in, is the fifth conference on women that sees cross-sectoral participation. Within this Generation Equality Forum, we see a framework called Action Coalition. And there are 6 thematic areas focusing on Action Coalition. And one of it is sexual and reproductive health and rights. Now, why am I doing these premises? The African Young Women Beijing 25 Manifesto really reflects what are the most pressing issues in the continent. Period poverty might not be a problem on the global north or in certain areas of the global south, but yet remains a problem in the continent. So when we talk about achieving gender equality, when we talk about the dignity of women, we cannot leave behind the conversation on menstrual hygiene and period poverty. And that's where the manifesto comes very straightforward and clear. We have a demand on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we have 4 pillars. Of course, the provision of universal access to essential sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I'm saying, of course, because it's somehow a sentence that we can find everywhere. But then when we talk about the introduction and the implementation of effective, comprehensive sexuality education courses and programs in school, this reflects the work of organizations such as the ones that Ruth and Peter are leading at community level. And that's why I really look forward to hearing from them. But the third sub-demand addresses clearly the removal of taxation on menstrual products. And this is extremely important because when we go to our Action Coalition blueprint, the mention on menstrual products and taxation is not there. And it's kind of funny because even in many European countries, taxation on menstrual product is still there. Our menstrual products are still seen as a luxurious item. Instead, this manifesto is actually advocating for the removal of taxation and duly recognizing period poverty. And that's when then the last point is on funding organizations that offer informative guidance, again, as the ones of Ruth, Peter, and many other organizations that we have had the pleasure to meet during our 5 regional barazas. So as we celebrate today, this International Day, reminding us about World Menstrual Hygiene Day, I would like to call on the participants, if you're not familiar with the manifesto, to go to nalafem.org, get familiar with the sub-demand, tell us if something is not clear, if you want more context about it. And if you think that these demands are good, then you can also put your endorsement by signing it. And Amina, I remain here. I actually look forward to hearing from the speakers. I'm sure they have more interesting inputs to give to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sodfa, for the contextualization, which is really important for us to understand the context or to understand the larger picture which we're part of, and to also understand that period poverty is not often spoken about, and menstrual hygiene products are still promoted as a luxury for a lot of African young women. So I know that we have participants joining us today from Ghana, from Chicago, from Nairobi. Thank you so much for taking time, and also from Zimbabwe. So thank you for taking time, because this conversation is also about solidarity and really coming together as African young women to speak about these issues and to actually highlight the challenges, but also the dysfunctionalities of the systems that govern us today, and that put a lot of pressure on young women's realities and dismiss them most often. So I would like to turn to our other guests, to Peter, to ask you, Peter, with your organization, you've worked and you're still working a lot on community engagement. So you're at the grassroots level to really sensitize on menstrual hygiene and address these stereotypes and challenges coming from period poverty. So could you please explain why it is vital for community engagement, and what are the best practices to make sure that community engagement and awareness is done accurately and properly across communities?
Oh, thank you, Amina, and sorry, and welcome everybody from all over the world. Amina, if you could give me access, I'm going to put my camera on so that people can at least see who is behind the voice. It is important. Why I engage in community engagement, let me see. You cannot stay on the video because the host has disabled it, okay? Okay, so if not, I can just go ahead. Something that we can discuss. And Okay, great. So thank you very much again, and thanks Sodfa for actually giving us an insight on how the entire generation equality and other documents work. So I'll talk about community engagement and why it is vital for menstrual hygiene management in the community. First of all, we know community is part of us. It is our thing, and it is where we stem from. So community engagement is vital, first in challenging the cultural restrictions and discriminatory gender rules that aggravate women's difficulty during menstruation. This is from our work that we've been doing in the community. We've seen it and we experience it in firsthand. So we work in the community to actually deconstruct and challenge all those cultural norms. So through community engagement, we are actually able to provide accurate, reliable, and safe information about menstrual hygiene and management to both boys, I say to both boys, as well as girls. So it is actually fostering understanding and attitudes, and it decreases the amount of social stigma associated with menstrual hygiene for women. I'll share a little bit of best practice, which we are actually talking about on this day. That is bringing men. Men are actually very important stakeholders as they are in position of power, in position of decision making, their influences within the family, they are influencers. They have influences in the community, the institutions, and other government bodies. So involving men and boys in menstrual hygiene management will actually help them, men and boys, develop compassion for women and girls. As such, men and boys can now purchase sanitary, purchase menstrual hygiene products for women and girls, and it helps in challenging that stereotypes, the fear, the shame, and discomfort that is actually associated with menstruation. So in effect, including men and boys will actually help build an effective and empowered community, which will in turn bridge that gap of inequality we are talking about here. So thank you very much, Amina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Those are really, really relevant points that you brought up, and we hear you. Community engagement is so important, and we cannot move forward, especially because we need to be speaking the language of the communities that we're talking to. So really simplifying the language and making sure that the awareness mobilizations are done with the communities and not for the communities. So working hand in hand also with men. And I agree, I think a huge part in many of our African countries, menstruation, if not all, menstruation is stigmatized. It's a taboo, and often the conversation or to feel at ease with one's body for women is not doesn't come with a lot of compassion, as you said. And I think empathy and compassion with male counterparts is so important. I'm very curious to hear about Ruth's experience, both with starting your organization. You said you'd tell us the story, but also with what you're doing on the ground. So perhaps I can ask you both questions and you could choose whichever way you'd like to answer. So we know that you're working in Tanzania on menstrual hygiene, and would love to get the background of the problem and how through education you are providing a solution.
Hi everyone. As I said, I'm Ruth Meriki, founder and director of EPN. I'm sorry that my camera cannot be played today because we are on the road from the program celebrating World Menstrual Health Hygiene Day. Well, I was raised and grew up in the Maasai community. Growing up in the community, I firsthand myself experienced how parents were discriminating against their girl children. Girls were not encouraged to attend school because, you know, they were expected to be married off. And the education would thus not benefit the family. They did not think that the education might actually prepare me for a future of my own, because a girl dream is not infinity, and we are not just born to be married. Well, there were many parts of life that my community did not prepare me for. When I was 15, one day at school, I stood up and felt something on my skirt. Well, it was blood, my first menstruation. I was so surprised by just the appearance of blood on my skirt. I was not prepared for this reality of my first menstruation. And I had no idea who to ask for help, because actually no one was even talking about it. Not my teachers, my female or male teachers, not my friends, not my mom. If you know Maasai tribe here, it's like a taboo. And not even my sister, who started their first menstruation before me. And therefore, there was no way I could gather the information and the courage to go about this huge change in my life. That day and that deep embarrassment I went through will still remain in my memory forever. I went on dealing with this unpleasant surprise and reality, thinking there was something wrong with me, and I had to figure it out myself at 15. I made a solution for myself. I cut out a piece of a rag from around school. I shook the date on that rag. I cut it into pieces. This was my first menstrual material. Later on, I used all this school uniform and sneaking in my mother's kikois. It was only after years of emotional suffering, itching, rashes, frequent UTIs, you can name it, I came to realize that this was not only my story, but a story of so many girls in and out of my community. And that some had it worse than me. Well, at this point in time, I wish someone would have told me what to do, what to expect on my first menstruation. The lack of access to this information, the lack of resources to adequately manage my period is what the world called now period poverty. Well, when I was much older, I had the opportunity to interview about 216 boys and 216 girls, 100 of parents, 100 of teachers and government officials in education and community members across 5 regions here in Tanzania, and about 40 schools, about the reason why many girls are dropping out, why many girls are missing out to schools during menstruation. When we began to talk openly about periods, what to expect and how to manage, it was like walking through a door. Since that day, I resolved to found an organization that specifically addresses period poverty. I knew so many people in my community were doing the same to address period poverty, but through the distribution of disposable or reusable sanitary pads. But despite the fact that people were addressing period poverty by providing pads, it was not adequate. Girls were still missing school. And I wanted to know why. We kept asking questions. So today, EPN is informed by the realities I faced and the struggles I found, speaking to so many girls and community members. We decided to found a program about menstrual health hygiene. Many programs, we have all of them, but we address them in the lens of mental health. But what I wanted to do was teaching girls, telling young girls, telling young women from primary school up to university what to expect when you have your menstruation. If you didn't have it yet, what does it look like? How to normalize periods. Periods are normal. It's something you can talk about. You don't have to manage periods by using only reusable sanitary pads or disposable pads, which some cannot even afford. There are cotton clothes that our moms use to manage period. Then what do you need? You need abundant information on how to use the materials that are safe what you have, but with education, what are the hygiene practices, what to do and what not to do, how to dry that cotton cloth in the sun, what information do you need so that you would not suffer the same thing I suffer. And then in the process, we made sure that the boys are at the center of our education. Why? Because we experienced that a lot of girls have been dropping out because they have the first menstruation at school. They have stained their skirts, and then the boys have been shaming them. And to avoid that shame, they drop all together. So why EPN decided to start an organization that actually provide only education, only training about menstruation, is because of my own experience. Now, when we started it, a lot of organization came in, community organization, international organization, that Ruth, we like the way you do education because we have a curriculum for primary school, we have a curriculum for secondary school girls, we have a curriculum for university, and then we have a curriculum for those young girls and women who cannot read and write. So they wanted to partner with us. They provide materials like reusable sanitary pads, disposable pads, and they take us to different fields, different community, different schools for us to provide the age and context specific education to these girls. So this is why education is critical to EPN and very important to our curriculum, because we found girls having these materials, but they sit with a pad for 10 to 12 hours. Girls who have menstruation and they think it's something they can never even tell a friend that I'm menstruating. So through this education, the girls are now talking about it. They know periods are a normal part of life. And every girl will go through that. We tell them, for those who didn't see their first periods, we might leave this door and you will start. Now you have abundant education, abundant information to start to go about it. So this is EPN and this is what we do.
Thank you so much, Ruth, and we really applaud you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing on the ground, and thank you so much for sharing your story. I think this is an experience that many of us can relate to. You know, those initial moments of embarrassment, the looks we get or we got, some of us as young as 9 years old, and really not understanding also the changes that happen to our bodies and the changes that emerge right after that. I don't remember having that education personally, and I'm someone who's been living in an urban space, never heard it at school, and you know, always feeling ashamed when purchasing menstrual products. And I think the conversation is really important, especially to think of the patriarchal structure. And I'm really curious to hear from Peter around, you know, how do the community see the role of men in working on menstrual hygiene? I'd really love for you to tell us, how does society perceive these male figures, quote unquote, who are advocating for menstrual hygiene?
Thank you, Amina. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So in my experience personally at the community level and engaging men and boys, it has been a very difficult task, because when engaging them is an issue, big issue of equality. So then talking about something they perceive as taboo. So we find ways around breaking this discussion, not like breaking the silence as a whole, but breaking this discussion and opening a space and creating this safe space for us to actually discuss it. So we start, first of all, engaging men with children that actually can see their responsibility, can see their roles in supporting their girls and actually accessing these services. Then for boys, we move to a much younger age group. So we start building their mind before they start getting the community or the cultural aspects of men don't talk about this thing. We start building their mind towards it. Since when they get it from us, they know it's something that is normal. They know it's something that is, you can discuss about it. So that's our roots of access. It hasn't been easy, but I'll tell you, gradually we are breaking the odds. We are building allies in the community with men, and we hope to push it further. We want more people who want to actually join us in this, to build allies with men, to actually destigmatize and deconstruct this cultural and religious beliefs, taboos around menstruation, to join us in the fight. But perfectly, it has not been easy, I would say. The playgrounds have not been easy. It's not very easy to talk to men about issues they see as taboo, see as religious, you know. But one step at a time, we are getting there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. Yeah, deconstructing, working against the structure, the patriarchal structure that exists, and solidarities, looking for allies who are really willing to hold up the hands of the people who are at the forefront and advocating for these new reforms at a social and structural level. There are so many questions in the chat, and I really want this to be as participatory as possible. I know Justine has asked if the webinar is only in English. Yes, Justine, but we do host other webinars in French, so please keep an eye on the website and on our social media for those upcoming websites, upcoming webinars in French. There's here a question for the Cameroon specific context from Yasmin. She's asking if there are taxation exemptions in Cameroon and other countries, and if not, how are you planning to achieve that? Peter, would you like to take on that question?
Yes, thank you, Amina. I'll greatly do that. So there is a huge tax. There's no tax exemption as far as on sanitary pads. And it is a huge problem because one sanitary pad is above $1. And a majority of these people live below this standard of less than $1 a day. So you first of all look at that gap. There's a huge gap in that. So as of now, we are planning to join the international organizations in Cameroon in advocating for a tax reduction or a free tax sanitary pad importation in Cameroon. In another sense, we are actually trying to look at alternative materials to encourage people in the communities to use alternative materials like the reusable sanitary pads. There is still a big question around the reusable sanitary pads, which honestly, in the context of wash or access to water and other services, I will not encourage people to, in that very low community, to go for it. But we are thinking that through the advocacy strategies that we want to build with international institutions in Cameroon, to ask the government, why not even do a free sanitary pad in Cameroon, whereas condom is free everywhere? So we are actually planning on doing something on that. But if you have an idea, please, we welcome it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I think it's important to have this conversation because some countries have started. So for instance, we know that Namibia has passed a law on it in March. Privilege, Shanana has said that in South Africa has implemented the exemption as well. However, you find that pads that can absorb for long are very expensive. So we now have that question of it's there, but the quality is reduced. And if you want to have access to the quality ones, then the gap is still there, as you said, considering how much people are earning on a daily basis. There's another question here, which I would love us to respond to. Could you please throw light on menstruation among girls with intellectual disabilities in terms of management and the role of caretakers for those who can't manage their periods at all? How can they be supported with their rights being upheld? This is a question from Sylvia from Uganda. Thank you very much, Sylvia, because yeah, I think the conversation on able-bodied and sexual health and rights is important, but also expanding the conversation and making it more inclusive is something that we can't afford not to do, especially at this time if we're talking about intersectional solidarity. So Ruth or Peters or Sodfa, if you'd like to take this question on what is the role or how can girls who cannot manage their periods based on their disabilities, and what's the role of caretakers in that?
Okay, I think before Ruth comes in, let me just throw a light on the aspect of rights. As far as the aspect of rights is concerned, we have to be very careful on issues for persons with intellectual disability. So far, I've worked with persons with physically challenged, visually impaired, deaf and dumb, and other disabilities, but I've not worked with persons with physical disabilities. But coming from a background of sexual and reproductive rights, I think we need to navigate around getting the caretakers and the parents of that person involved, so they sign a consent form. For example, if you want to actually do it practically with the person because of his disability, you have to actually make them sign a consent form. But we try as much as possible to avoid that aspect, rather than teaching the parents and giving them the importance of helping the persons because of a disability to actually sort that issue out. So there are two ways that I think I can do it if I find myself in that situation, which is advisable, but I've never been faced with that challenges. So I'll get involved the people around the caretakers to actually do it, or I let them sign a consent form so that it gives me an advantage to actually do a practical experience. Ruth, can you throw more light?
It is exactly what we do now, is having the parents or caretakers in the session. For example, there is school with one school we did with girls with intellectual disability. And what we did, for example, when we get an inquiry to teach and distribute pads, what we do, we went first to visit the site. When we visited the site, we make sure we see what kind of girls they are differences in understanding, so that we can make something that will not leave others out. So for this kind of girls, what we do, we requested to have the parents or guardians or caretakers in the training, and we train them together. This is what you should do. This is what the girls should understand. So we basically teach them, okay, this is the year cycle. This is when they are supposed to get the menstruation. They have, for example, 21 days cycle or 28 days cycle. So this is how to take care of them. And we have found it very successful. The parents, we made a free toll number, our office number, that the parents can SMS, or they can ask us to call them back, because we took the names, we took the numbers. So we keep asking them, how are you doing? What do you need us to help you? So we constantly help them, but the parents and the guardians got it in the first place, and it has been successful. So for us, it is the training that we provide to the caretakers. The caretakers are willing, if they are involved in the conversation, to take care of these girls, so that they are not left out in this conversation, because they much need it.
Definitely, it's a participatory learning for everyone, and it needs to include everyone. So the families, the men in the families, as Peter said. Thank you very much, Ruth, for that answer. I hope it was able to. It explained a lot, and I hope the person who's asked it was able to understand how to go about things moving forward. So really, as Ruth said, learning or teaching both the person and their families, and educating across the family. So thank you, Sylvia, for that question. There is a very simple question by Justine, who's asking, how can we help those girls and women who live in remote areas? And I think this is very much linked to a comment by Privilege, who said that sometimes the reusable pads are not hygienic, because most countries, or specifically spaces like Zimbabwe, running water can be an issue. So also thinking about rural spaces. Peter or Ruth, if you'd like to take on that question.
Okay. The situation in the person asking which country is he coming from. So I take, for example, one of the rural areas in Africa. It's not different from what happens in Cameroon. It's not different from the day-to-day situation we face with our sisters, our mothers, our neighbors in the community where we live in. I live in a remote community. I don't live in a city. I live in a remote community. I see these things on a daily basis. So I try as much as possible to look for alternative measures, like the reusable sanitary towels, not, they are reusable sanitary towels. Yes, we still have these challenges of wash, like access to running water, access to cleaning detergents to clean it, but we find a way around, navigating a way around getting water in the area where if you actually have a bit of water, you could use detergent to clean the sanitary towels and use some in drying them so that they are healthy for the next use. That is one way. Another way is actually to make appeals, to look for appeals, which is not sustainable for people to donate sanitary pads and you keep giving them. In the office, or when we are working with persons with disability, we make appeals and we always have the constant donations of these disabilities for sanitary pads for us to donate for persons with disabilities, but it's not feasible, it's not sustainable. So it's something that we just need to come around, figure out a way of making women having now more water, access to water and other materials around where they stay so they can actually use the reusable sanitary pads, which is more practical in their conditions and in their case. Thank you very much. I hope Ruth can add something.
I think, Peter, you have covered that. It is the same, actually reusable sanitary pads. This is what the education we give in the rural area, especially rural girls, whose think, even mentioning menstruation is a taboo. It's not something to be talked about. This is what we tell them. Even if you have a poor access to water, there is no one who cannot get a 1 liter or 2 liter or 3 liters of water. So we have been asking them, can you access even 3 liters of water per day? And the answer was yes. And so we capitalize on that. You need at least 3 liters of water to wash your reusable sanitary pads. Just clean and cold water. Soak in 1 liter after the blood has been separated itself from the pad. Take that pad, put in another 1 liter or 2 liters of water, a bar soap, wash it, and then go to another clean water, 1 liter or 2 liters, and dry it in the sun. Make sure it is dried in the sun. And if there is no sun, for example, now in Arusha, it is very cold and it is raining a bit. So make sure the wind gets to that pad. If it gets enough wind, it can dry, because reusable sanitary pads is a solution to economically challenged communities. It is just how to practice hygiene in this kind of product. Because if you give the girls, what we found out actually, encouraging the girls to use disposable pads, especially in rural areas, is actually creating a new need, because these girls will be very comfortable with it. And for example, one organization goes there, provide 3 to each girls. After 4 months of menstruation, this girl will run out of these pads and they will find a substitute. How am I going to get these pads? Then sugar daddies will provide it. The young men in the community, the TikTok driver will provide it. And what will happen? Early pregnancy. What will happen? The girls will drop out. So it is very dangerous to create a need to provide a solution that will actually create a new need. We are trying to protect these girls anyhow we can. Information will help them. I found information as a very great and critical tool to take these girls from this place to another. So information, as Peter said.
Thank you, Peter and Ruth. I hope everyone is taking note. I think we all have a role in educating our communities about menstrual hygiene across social spaces, and whether we're in rural or urban spaces. There's a comment here which I think is very interesting and worth discussing perhaps, which is Akwesi Sarpong is suggesting homegrown manufacturing and production of sanitary pads for girls, young people, including those with disabilities. And I would love to hear what Peter and Ruth think about this, since men should also become involved actively in menstrual health awareness. And it definitely begins from home, as Sam says. Thank you for saying that you are going to champion and support this cause. Yes, we need to bring more men to talk about mental health, hygiene, menstrual hygiene. Words and English is failing me today. I think, yeah, Peter, I think you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam, for supporting my cause. Thank you very much. So I think, like I said in my first remark, is we need more men. We need men to actually come on board, because men are seen from different positions, mostly from the position of power, decision makers and influencers within the families, and influencers within the communities and institutions, and even policy makers. And I take a good example of my country. Women don't have anything to do with policy, because the women in our, for example, our parliament are less than 30%. As our ministers, they're almost 0%. There's no woman as a minister. So women don't have that power. So we need men to come on board so that we can actually see it from that perspective and push it, not just from a political aspect, but from an equal aspect, equality aspect, and women's health rights aspect. So talking about that, I think that is set. And talking about the issue of homegrown, there is a big politics, not only around menstrual or sanitary materials, but around every other aspect in Africa. We have, for example, we have cotton in Cameroon, but we don't produce. We export and then import the finished product. So as far as this is concerned, it's a politics that actually is difficult to just say it online or say it to people and you come over it. No, it's not. So we actually, in our part, we said, okay, that's why we want reusable sanitary pads. What are those reusable materials made from? They're imported materials from China, from other countries. So Africa is in the whole situation of political fears that we found ourselves using things that people actually we import from other countries. Please, I'm very passionate about this thing, and I don't want to get into the issue of politics. So yes, we encourage our homegrown materials. And if I've seen somewhere around either Kenya or Nigeria where they're using plantain fibers to actually make materials, that is something I was planning to get in contact with that person and to see if they can actually use those plantain fibers and actually produce, if it is healthy, produce materials for sanitary pads. Then we'll happily have those kind of materials promoted in our communities and even promote at the level of Africa for every other organizations to have access to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. And I think I have a question for Ruth. You know, if we're going to speak on structural policy changes, I'm really curious about your take on the removal of taxation on menstrual products. So what will it take to actually remove that taxation? How do you think can we really infiltrate the politics and push for young women's demands, which have been mentioned in the Africa Young Women Manifesto, notably what we're speaking about today on this particular topic? Ruth, can you hear me? Peter, would you like to take that question? I'm not sure if.
No, sorry, come again. I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Just repeat the question, please.
So I'm asking you, both you and Ruth, what will it actually take to
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, I can. I'm wondering about structural policy changes and what it will actually take to infiltrate the politics to make sure that this demand is heard at national levels, that taxation on menstrual hygiene products should be removed. So what kind of roadmap do we need, and how do we rally around this demand?
Okay, Ruth, do you want to go first? Ruth? Okay.
The only, we actually started it in Tanzania with different women activists. And because, many in Tanzania, especially, the policy influencers mostly are men. And in order to get, for example, to the parliament, where, they first have to hear it, and then they first have to have a conversation about it, and then change the policy, whatever it will be. So it has not been so successful, but people started together again, because we thought when we push the agenda and there is a female president on top, she will think actually about it. So we have a menstrual health hygiene coalition where it gathers all the stakeholders, government and non-government, local and international, who operates in Tanzania on menstrual health hygiene, to start to talk about it, to have the conversation. Like, we need to have a tax-free, the products have to, the menstrual product should not be taxed. You cannot, we start a conversation like, sex is a choice, but menstruation is not a choice. Stop distributing condoms, tax the condoms, because somebody has to choose to have sex. But to menstruate, people are not choosing it. So we have a lot of community, civil society organization, non-profit organization, both international and local. We decided after this World Menstrual Health Hygiene, because rather than other years in Tanzania, this is the most famous. The campaign is huge. And we took the agenda to the minister. The minister involved in the health sector in Tanzania is also a woman. So 3 days ago, we took the agenda to her. This is what people are looking for. And she will be attending to Dodoma World Menstrual Hygiene Day today. And that will be the main agenda. So we are waiting. It is the organization, it is everyone making noisy about it that will actually make people involved to change the policy or the agenda. And why? Because we are making all the men involved. We started telling men, start talking about it at home. Make sure you have a budget for your girl. Make sure menstruation is an agenda in your home. Make sure the menstruation is an agenda in the office. Make sure menstruation is an agenda in the parliament. So it is a famous conversation now, and we hope and finger crossed that something will happen after this campaign.
Okay, Ruth, thank you very much for that elaborate discussion. I will just add from the perspective of Cameroon. Hooray to Tanzania for having a female president and a minister of health that is female, because you can easily pass that bill and let women enjoy that facilities in Tanzania henceforth. But for Cameroon, it's an issue of community engagement. Why I say community engagement? Because we are trying to build a younger generation where by tomorrow, when they have to get the opportunity, the possibilities of getting into power, they have that education being built from that very young age, and they grow with that mindset. As of now, a lot of coalitions, a lot of organizations have actually seen it necessary, deem it to pass it through the parliament and the rest. But Cameroon, with the current state of from the past 4 years or 5 years, with the current state, those kind of discussions are not part of parliamentary discussions, are not part of, they just keep it somewhere and freeze it in the fridge until when some other person thinks about it sometime. So, but I think that using the community model that we are trying to build, raising these ideas from the community, getting people involved at that grassroots level. Tomorrow, those people at the grassroots level, they are going to be on top. No matter what, no matter how long it takes, they are going to look at that, and when they start pushing from that angle, it's already something that is inbuilt, it's already incorporated in them. It's easy for them to pass across that kind of bill in our parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter and Ruth. I think this conversation needs more than an hour, and I'm really sad to say that we have to finish very soon. But I think this is only the beginning of the conversation. And if you're here, it means that you're part of the advocacy and you want to drive the agenda forward. And kudos to what you're doing, Ruth, and on taking that to a policy level, because I think that's really what needed. And I'd just like to add what Sam said, you know, civil society organizations and grassroots activists like yourselves can play a big role in demanding for the removal of taxes. It's not easy, but it's doable. We can petition parliament, issue statements, use friendly parliamentarians to table a motion, work with the media, build coalitions, and use today, the 28th of May, to hold high-level panels to discuss this. You can also sign the Africa Young Women Manifesto, which the Nala Feminist Collective is driving forward. It's a document that 1,500 young people from 44 African countries have come together to co-write, and the aim is to push for its implementation. It has 10 demands, and for it to be heard within Generation Equality Forum, and for member states, African member states, to actually implement those 10 demands, which includes the removal of taxation on menstrual hygiene products. So I'm really sad to say that we've come to the end of this webinar. However, I was so pleased to host you, Peter and Ruth, and also my colleague, Sodfa. This has been the beginning of a conversation. I would like to invite everyone to perhaps continue the conversation on Twitter. Let's keep chatting. We know that a lot of organizations have been doing some live tweets. Thank you to Akili Dada for being with us today. Thank you for our other partner organizations who are supporting the conversation. So yeah, let's keep it a chat and let's keep conversing. And my last ask would be to please speak about the manifesto as much as you can. Read it. It's available in 5 languages, in Kiswahili, in Arabic, in French, in Portuguese, and in Spanish. And do mainstream it and speak about menstrual health hygiene and about why it's important to come together to push forward for implementing lifestyles that are, for implementing policies that will make the lifestyles and the lives of young African girls easier and less harsher as we move through the next decade and years, to say the least. Thank you once again, Peter. Thank you, Ruth. It's been a delight, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
I will, for anyone who's wondering how to sign the manifesto, I will drop the link in the web, in our Zoom chat, and you can click on it and share it as widely as possible. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you.